There is a sacred time when the world is still, when distractions fade, when the noise of the day has not yet begun. It is in these early hours between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. that a great mystery unfolds, a time when the unseen is more accessible, when the mind is most receptive, when what is held in thought takes root in reality. This is not an ordinary window of time. It is a portal to the deeper self, a doorway to creation, a moment when the barriers between what is and what can be are at their weakest. Many sleep through this time, unaware of the power it holds. But those who understand, those who awaken with purpose, know that this is the moment to shape reality, to plant the seeds of what will soon unfold. It is in this quiet, before the world stirs, that thoughts are most potent, that belief is most effective, that what is imagined takes on a life of its own. The mind, unburdened by the distractions of the day, is pure, open, and ready to receive. There is a time when the world is quiet, when the distractions of the day have not yet begun, when the mind is free from the weight of yesterday's thoughts. In these early hours, before the sun rises, before the noise of life takes over, there exists a power that few recognize. It is the moment when the unseen world is nearest, when the conscious and the subconscious are aligned, when what is imagined has the greatest chance of taking form. It is in this time that reality is most malleable, most receptive to the thoughts that are deliberately planted. Many sleep through these hours, unaware of the treasure they waste. They wake only when necessity demands it, when obligations call them forward, never realizing that long before they open their eyes, the shape of their day has already been set. But there are those who know, those who rise with intention, those who step into the silence not to observe what is, but to declare what will be. The world operates on rhythm, on cycles, on patterns. Just as there is a time to plant and a time to harvest, so too is there a time to create in the unseen before it appears in the seen. And this time, this sacred window exists before the world wakes. The mind, still soft from sleep, is impressionable. It has not yet hardened to the limitations of the physical senses, has not yet locked into the routine of doubt and worry. In this moment, what is assumed will sink deeply, will take root, will begin the process of unfolding into experience. What is held in thought at this hour does not remain in thought. It moves, it takes shape, it becomes. The one who understands this does not wake and look at life as it is. He wakes and decides what it shall be. He does not measure progress by what the senses report. He does not wait for evidence before believing. He knows that belief precedes evidence, that the unseen must be accepted as real before it becomes visible. The world will tell you otherwise. It will insist that reality is fixed, that things take time, that circumstances must change before you can feel different. But the one who knows the power of these hours understands that change does not begin in the world, it begins in the mind. The one who rises and impresses his subconscious with certainty, with expectation, with absolute knowing, sets forces in motion that cannot be stopped. This is not a time for struggle, nor for effort, nor for questioning. It is a time for stillness, for assumption, for stepping into the state of already having. The one who does this, who moves into the feeling of the wish fulfilled before the world demands his attention, will see the day bend to his assumption. Events will shift, opportunities will arise, people will act in ways that support his vision, not because he forced them to, not because he manipulated circumstances, but because he first aligned himself inwardly with what was always meant to be. Most wake up and let the past dictate the future. They check for signs, they measure progress, they react to yesterday. But the wise do not waste these sacred hours on what was. They use them to shape what will be. They rise and sit in stillness, allowing the feeling of their desires to wash over them as though they were already true. They do not hope, they do not wish, they do not plead. They assume, and in that assumption, the unseen moves, the world rearranges itself, and what was once thought impossible becomes inevitable. The greatest mistake is to think that effort creates change, that struggle produces results, that action alone is enough. Action is the shadow of belief. It follows, it does not lead. The one who first moves in the unseen will find that the seen follows effortlessly. Doors will open without knocking. Paths will clear without force. Everything necessary will be drawn in perfect alignment, as though it were always meant to be. Many will hear this and dismiss it, will argue for their limitations, will insist that life is dictated by external forces. But those who have tested this, those who have woken in these hours and taken control of their thoughts, will know its truth. They will see the difference between a day created deliberately and a day that happens by default. And once this truth is known, it cannot be unknown. The world is not happening to you, it is responding to you. The greatest power lies not in what is done outwardly, but in what is assumed inwardly. And there is no better time to assume, no better time to create, no better time to step into the reality of your desire than in the silent, sacred hours before the world stirs. There is a moment when the conscious mind loosens its grip, when the veil between what is seen and what is yet to be is at its thinnest. It is in this moment, in the silent space between dreams and waking, that the greatest work is done, not with hands, not with effort, but with thought alone. The early hours hold a secret that few recognize, a power that has shaped the lives of those who understand its significance. Before the world is awake, before the mind is cluttered with demands, there is a sacred opening where impressions sink deeply, where assumptions take root, where reality is set into motion. Many move through life unaware of this power, allowing the past to dictate the future, believing that circumstances must change before belief can follow. But those who know, those who rise in the stillness, understand that the subconscious is most open before the world stirs, before logic and doubt take hold, before the noise of the day distracts from the truth. And in this state, whatever is assumed with feeling must come to pass. It is not a question of if, but when. The mistake is in believing that change happens outside of you, that the movement of the world determines what is possible, that evidence must be seen before belief is justified. But the unseen precedes the seen. The invisible shapes the visible. The world is only a reflection, a mirror, of what has already been assumed within. And there is no better time to impress upon this mirror than in the hours when the conscious mind is still, when the subconscious is most receptive, when belief is most potent. To wake between these hours and dwell upon the past is to create more of the same, to rise and rehearse old failures, to recall disappointments, to measure progress by the senses alone is to keep oneself bound to what has been. But the one who understands does not use this time to reflect on yesterday. He uses it to step into tomorrow. He moves into the feeling of what he desires as though it were already his. He does not question, does not waver, does not seek proof. He simply assumes. And in this assumption, the foundation of his new reality is laid. This is not a passive act. It is not idle daydreaming or wishful thinking. It is deliberate creation. It is the conscious direction of thought, the purposeful selection of what will be planted in the fertile soil of the subconscious. And once planted, it must grow. It must express itself in the world, just as a seed must become the tree it was designed to be. Many wake up and immediately turn to the outside world, seeking validation, searching for confirmation that things are changing. But this is backward. The wise do not look for signs, they create them. They do not wait for circumstances to shift before they believe first, knowing that the world must follow. They understand that what is seen now is simply the echo of past thought, that the future is shaped not by action alone, but by the invisible forces set into motion in these quiet moments. The power of these hours is not in effort, but in surrender. Surrendering to the truth that what is imagined and felt must become real. The one who rises before the world, who steps into the feeling of already having, who impresses the mind with certainty, moves through the day differently. He does not react, he creates. He does not hope, he knows. He does not wait, he assumes that what he has seen within must unfold without. And so the wise wake early, not to worry, not to plan, not to struggle, but to assume, to sit in silence and dwell in the reality of what they have already received, though the eyes may not yet see it. They hold to the vision, not as something distant, not as something uncertain, but as something already done. And because they do, the world bends to meet them. There is no force in this, no strain, no struggle. The greatest transformations happen in the unseen, in the quiet, in the stillness, before the sun rises. The one who understands does not fight against the world, does not push against circumstances, does not chase after change. He creates it in thought first, knowing that what is impressed upon the subconscious in these sacred hours will soon harden into fact. To sleep through this time unaware is to allow life to happen by default, to remain at the mercy of past assumptions, to wake up only to repeat what has been, but to wake with intention, to use these hours to assume, to believe, to step into the state of already having, is to take hold of the unseen and shape it into the seen. And once this is understood, once this is practiced, once this becomes a way of being, life no longer happens to you, you happen to life. There is a great misconception in the world, one that keeps many bound to the life they wish to escape. They believe that what is seen determines what is possible, that the circumstances of today dictate the outcomes of tomorrow. They wake each morning and look at the world as it is, accepting it as fact, allowing it to shape their thoughts, their emotions, their expectations. But the truth is far greater than what the senses reveal. The truth is that reality does not exist outside of you. It is formed within. It is not the external world that controls the future, but the assumptions held in the silence before the day begins. Before the world stirs, before the mind is pulled into its familiar patterns, there is a sacred window, a time when what is assumed can take root without resistance. In these hours, between sleep and waking, the conscious mind is not yet rigid, not yet bound by the logic of the senses. The subconscious is open, receptive, waiting to be impressed. And what is impressed in this time will harden into fact, will move unseen forces into alignment, will shape the events of the day to come. The mistake is to wake and react, to check for signs, to look at life as it is and accept it as the only truth. But the wise do not do this. They wake and remember that what is seen now is simply the shadow of past thought. They do not wait for proof to believe. They believe first, knowing that proof must follow. They do not measure their desires against their current circumstances. They know that circumstances are fluid, changeable, reflections of inner conviction. It is between these sacred hours that reality is chosen, not through effort, not through struggle, but through assumption. The one who wakes in stillness and assumes the feeling of already having, of already being, of already living his desire, sets forces into motion that cannot be stopped. He moves beyond time, beyond limitation, beyond the constraints of what the world calls possible. He understands that the unseen precedes the seen, that belief precedes evidence, that what is felt inwardly must become outwardly real. Creation is not something to be forced, it is something to be accepted. It is not about waiting for the world to give permission. It is about knowing that permission was never needed. The one who understands does not wake up asking if his desire will come. He wakes up knowing it already has. He does not question, does not doubt, does not seek validation. He assumes. And in this assumption, the world bends to match him. There is no struggle in this. No desperate reaching, no anxious hoping. It is not about wishing or pleading, but about knowing. The one who wakes before the world, who uses these hours to dwell in the state of fulfillment, does not move through the day the same way as others. He is not shaken by appearances, not discouraged by delays, not swayed by what the senses report. He holds firm to what he has assumed, and because he does, it must become real. The greatest mistake is to look outside and take direction from what is seen, to wake and feel the same emotions as yesterday, to dwell on the same doubts, to assume that what was must continue to be. But the wise know that life is not dictated by what has been. It is dictated by what is believed in the present moment. And there is no moment more powerful than the one before the world takes hold, before distractions arise, before the mind is filled with the weight of the day. This is the time to create, to assume, to declare what will be. It is not done through effort, nor through waiting, but through stepping into the state of already having. The one who understands does not concern himself with how or when. He knows that the process is already in motion, that the unseen is shifting, that the world is aligning itself according to what he has impressed upon the mind. He moves as though his desire is already fulfilled, speaks as though it is already done, lives as though it is already his. And because he does, the unseen must become seen. The world has no choice but to reflect the inner reality he has established. What was once a thought, a feeling, an assumption, will harden into fact. Circumstances will shift. People will move. Doors will open. And it will not be by chance, nor by effort, but by the quiet, unseen work done in the early hours when the world was still. Most will hear this and continue as they always have. They will wake and check their phones, worry about the future, react to the past. But those who know, those who test this, those who rise in the silence and assume the life they desire before the day begins, they will see the difference. They will know that life does not happen to them, they happen to life. And once this truth is known, it can never be forgotten. There is a law at work, one that governs all things, whether recognized or not. It does not concern itself with effort, with struggle, or with the opinions of the world. It operates in silence, in certainty, in the unseen depths where all creation begins. And it is in the early hours, when the world is still, when the mind is free from its habitual clinging to appearances, that this law is most accessible. To those who understand, these hours are not ordinary. They are the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the point at which what is assumed begins its journey into form. Most wake up and search for evidence. They open their eyes and measure reality by what they can see, touch, and hear, forgetting that what is seen is only the result of past thought. They live as reactors, responding to life instead of shaping it. But the wise do not do this. They wake before the world and choose, in those sacred hours, what reality will be. They do not concern themselves with what was. They focus only on what is becoming. There is a great misunderstanding about faith. Many believe it to be hope, to be wishing, to be a fragile thing that must be strengthened through effort. But true faith is not seeking proof. It is knowing without the need for proof. It does not waver, does not question, does not search for validation. It simply assumes. And assumption, when felt deeply, when accepted as fact within, must be made manifest in the world. This is the power of the early hours. The mind, fresh from sleep, is still untethered to the rigid structures of the waking world. It has not yet settled into doubt, has not yet been bombarded by the noise of the day. It is in this window that one may most easily impress upon it the reality they wish to experience. And once impressed, it moves into action, setting unseen forces into motion, rearranging the world in ways that cannot be explained by logic alone. The mistake is in waking and questioning, in seeking outward confirmation before belief is established. But the wise understand that all things are created twice, first within, then without. The one who knows does not rise to see what life has given him. He rises and tells life what it must become. He does not leave his reality to chance. He does not wait for signs. He moves into the feeling of the wish fulfilled before his feet ever touch the ground. It is not about force, it is not about waiting, it is about knowing. The greatest work is done in stillness, not in effort. The moment assumption is made real in the mind, it is as good as done in the world. There may be a delay, but delay is not denial. The one who holds to his assumption with unwavering certainty will see the world shape itself accordingly. He does not check for signs, does not ask when or how. He simply moves through the day as one who already possesses that which he once desired. To rise before the sun and assume one's desire as fulfilled is not an empty exercise. It is the very act that brings it to pass. The world, though seemingly solid, is fluid, changeable, responsive to belief. What is assumed inwardly must find its way into expression. And those who understand this, who practice it daily, who rise in the stillness and claim their reality before the world takes hold, will see with their own eyes the truth of this law. Most will continue as they always have, waking and reacting, waiting for life to prove itself to them. But those who know will wake and declare their reality before a single event unfolds. They will not concern themselves with appearances, for they understand that appearances follow assumption, not the other way around. And because they know this, life must conform to their knowing. It is not the world that changes first, it is the mind. And the one who masters the unseen will find that the seen bends to meet him. This is the secret of creation, the truth that so few grasp, but once understood, it can never be forgotten. Life does not happen to you. It happens through you. And in the silent hours, before the world stirs, you hold in your hands the power to shape it as you will. All that is seen began in the unseen. The world, though seemingly fixed and unchangeable, is nothing more than a reflection of what has been assumed within. To believe that life happens by chance, that circumstances dictate destiny, is to surrender the power that has always been yours. But to wake with intention, to use the sacred hours before the world stirs to assume the reality you desire, is to take hold of creation itself. Nothing is withheld from the one who understands. There is no need to chase, to struggle, to wait for signs. The moment an assumption is accepted as true within, it must find expression without. The law does not fail. The wise do not concern themselves with appearances, for they know appearances are only echoes of past thought. They do not seek permission from the world to believe in what is already theirs. They claim it, they assume it, and in time they see it made real. To rise before the world and declare what must be is not an empty ritual. It is the very act of creation. And those who practice it, those who refuse to be swayed by doubt, those who live in the end before the end is seen, will find that life unfolds in perfect harmony with their belief. They do not react, they create. They do not hope, they know. And because they know, the world must conform. This is a truth that cannot be denied. You do not wait for life to change. You change within, and life follows. And once this is understood, it is impossible to live any other way.